Hey everybody, I am Brian Pryor and I am one of the Prevention Education Specialists with the Crime Victim Center of Erie County. Working with the organization that I do means I see a lot of presentations about victimization. I've been to dozens of seminars, watched a ton of webinars, and been through plenty of trainings dealing with victimization. So when I was offered a chance to do a video presentation for our social media field, there were several topics that I thought of addressing. The one topic that kept coming back to mind time and time again was masculinity and what it means to have healthy masculinity. And of course, that led to the term toxic masculinity. It's a term that breeds contempt, anger, frustration, but also confusion and misunderstanding. So I wanted to take some time to clear up what we mean by toxic masculinity and healthy masculinity. I found that there is rarely ever a true discussion on problems of victimization that goes anywhere once the term toxic masculinity is brought forward. Why is that? Why is the subject so charged that YouTube comment boards for Gillette commercials quickly devolve into name calling and threats of violence? Why does the term toxic masculinity lead to such response and outrage? I think it's because the term toxic masculinity leads a lot of people to assume that being masculine must be toxic. That was never the purpose of that term. At least I don't think that was ever the purpose. When men express masculinity in a healthy and constructive way, not only is masculinity okay, but it can go a long way in preventing victimization. So I would like to clear up what is meant by healthy and unhealthy masculinity in hopes of making clear why everyone can benefit from the understanding. Here are 5 areas where we can see the difference between healthy and unhealthy masculinity. When we look at jobs and occupations, a classic idea and definition of masculinity is that a man should find a job, work hard, and provide for himself and his family. His job should be part of how he defines himself, and a certain level of priority should be put on his job. There is nothing wrong, unhealthy, or toxic about that. Any job, any occupation can go a long way in helping define a healthy idea of masculinity. But when a man is considered less of a man for, say, losing his job, or when the gender of his coworkers or even boss define how masculine a man is, this is when these ideas can become unhealthy. The focus goes from positive aspects of masculinity to implications of weakness, and that usually leads to overcompensation and the need for one to prove one's masculinity. And this is why we see certain occupations defined as more masculine than others. The truth of the matter is, any man can work any job and be creating a healthy definition of masculinity. Hobbies and activities. This one often ties into the first area where masculinity gets defined. Healthy masculinity can come about when men engage in their favorite hobbies and activities. Does that mean loving metalworking, woodworking, automotive work, or even hunting makes a man toxic? Does being a healthy masculine individual mean that you like to sew, crochet, or cook, or garden, or play music, or enjoy different foods or drinks? Again, that's not what we mean. Healthy masculinity is not found in the hobbies or activities themselves. It is how we define the men who engage in them. Every time certain activities are seen as less masculine, this is where the judgment and toxic aspect comes in. Any hobby can be an opportunity to express healthy masculinity as long as it does not come at the cost or lessening of others. Even having a hobby can sometimes make someone the subject of ridicule if it is seen as a distraction from one's job and prevents them from keeping their eyes on the prize. Once again, any hobby or activity can help define healthy masculinity as long as it's not coming at the cost or ridicule or mockery of others. Another subject of confusion when dealing with masculinity is the issue of strength, physicality, and athletics. Is it toxic or unhealthy for a man to increase his strength, work out, build his muscles, or even engage in physically aggressive sports? Again, the answer is no. There is nothing in any of those things that creates an unhealthy environment and unhealthy definition of masculinity. It's not the athlete, football player, or mixed martial artists themselves that's an example of unhealthy masculinity. But when someone engaged in those athletics sees less athletic men as lesser men, then unhealthy masculinity can creep up. Strength and physical health also can be an opportunity to engage people and help define masculinity in a healthy way. Honestly, if more discussion about healthy masculinity occurred in athletic environments between men, about men, a true healthy change could result. But as long as there are people out there who feel men who do not compete in traditionally manly athletics aren't lifting enough weights, aren't strong enough, or are lesser men, or not even men at all, then grounds for unhealthy masculinity are there. Men can be athletes and still be healthy masculine adults. But we as men are also told to express ourselves through our strength and physicality. And that can sometimes be problematic. Why does this happen? Well, I think a big reason why is how we define masculinity and emotions. Now, when something toxic enters our bodies as humans, one of our most basic defense mechanisms is to purge ourselves of it, get it out. This happens through vomiting, sweating, going to the bathroom, all those ways we have things leave our body. Sometimes we know we are not well and we can make ourselves purge, but often it is reflexive and beyond our control. If we don't do those things, the toxicity harms us. Emotions are the same way. Men are often taught to not be emotional, not be a crybaby, to not be so sensitive. But when you realize that asking that of a person is the same as asking a violently ill person to, quote, keep it in and, quote, knock it off, you can see why it's so unhealthy to consider lack of emotion and expression of emotions a definition of masculinity. Now, some people just don't cry. We're all different, all humans, male and female, and we are going to have our emotions and express them in all different ways. But when someone considers themselves masculine and has emotions, but are also being told to hide them, not show them, or not even have them, this is asking the impossible of a person and can lead to even greater pain and hurt. In my field, it's not rare that a victimizer was victimized. It's common. Another common trait of victimizers, male victimizers specifically, is a pattern of unhealthy emotional behavior. How can we be healthy, truly healthy people, if the most natural of our existence, our emotions and humanity, aren't allowed to be expressed in a healthy way? How can we have a world where boys and girls are victimized at almost equal rates, but boys and young men actually report their victimizations far less? And we call that healthy? If we consider it not masculine to be a victim, then no, quote, masculine victims will ever come forward. Even currently, news outlets have considered to stop calling certain groups, quote, vulnerable to the coronavirus because it implies weakness and lack of masculinity. This is just another illustration of how unhealthy and toxic masculinity definitions have led themselves not only to emotions and feelings, but the words we use to describe emotions and feelings. The final area I wanted to discuss when dealing with healthy masculinity is sexuality itself. Does a healthy masculinity involve hiding or masking the sexual attractions a person has? Does a healthy masculinity means the person hides what their sexuality and sexual preference is? Again, no. Heterosexual men can be healthy masculine men. Homosexual men can be toxic. The sexuality of a person is just as natural as our emotions, but the hiding of them in any form can be toxic. And more so when a person expresses their sexuality but degrades others through it or treats other sexualities as less than, it can be a very unhealthy situation for everyone involved. Healthy masculinity means recognizing one's own sexuality, but not putting other sexualities beneath that. So, what is it that leads all those violent, angry comments and responses about toxic masculinity to happen? Why all the anger, the fear, and the rage? Why do discussions on masculinity lead to fights and conflict? Well, looking at all these subjects and how I have discussed these today, I feel I have fallen a bit of a victim to unhealthy masculinity too. Because the truth is, there is no one masculinity. There are many. The real goal should be recognizing and encouraging healthy areas of all masculinities and avoiding the negative parts. The idea of one true definition has led most people to fight to defend their idea of masculinity as the right one. It is why comments are defensive on the subject so often. When we realize being masculine isn't toxic or unhealthy, the unhealthy part is how we define the boundaries and limits of masculinity, or the idea that there is only one way to be masculine. Then the true discussion can happen. My goal here today was never to make anyone feel less masculine or that they are the wrong kind of masculine. My goal was to create a place where I can bring this subject up without having to be afraid anymore. So you tell me, does that make me less of a man?